I am going to just talk you through your first assessment task for this term. So, as we've discussed in class, you have a mock research presentation task. Please note that this final presentation, you'll present this in your groups in week 6 on Wednesday, and that date will not change. The unit that we're doing at the moment, as you know, is Commedia dell'arte, and you have 3 weeks' notice of this task. You'll have a dress rehearsal year 11 on Monday in week 5 as well. So please make notes of these dates in your school journals and in your own personal calendars as well. So let's have a look at this task and what you're expected to do. I'd like you to, on your own task sheet, highlight these 3 terms because you're going to be an inquirer. That means a researcher, someone who goes and inquires about different parts of information. You're going to devise, and you're also going to perform or present. And you're going to deliver a group research presentation that explores the cultural and theoretical context. I would highlight those 2 words because you will see that these form the basis of the first part of your criteria. So you're exploring the cultural and theoretical context of Commedia dell'arte. As part of the presentation, students will physically demonstrate 2 Commedia dell'arte conventions and explain how each convention is used to enhance performance. Students will share their learnings and discoveries about the theatrical processes involved and reflect, please highlight reflect, on the impact that this theatre tradition has had on them as a thespian and a learner. So there are different parts, 3 different parts to this task, okay, which I'll explain in a moment when I go through your criteria. So firstly, let's have a look at the conditions. So year 11, you are allowed to do this task in pairs, groups of 3, or a group of 4, a maximum group of 4, okay? It's 5 minutes per person for the presentation. Now, you may choose to divide your presentation into different parts. Perhaps one person does the first part and someone else does the second, and then you all do a section of performance together. I'll talk about the performance aspect because it's more of a practical explanation than performance. So you can either do 5-minute chunks or you might change it up a little bit and one person speaks for a minute and then the next person speaks for a minute. It's approximately 5 minutes per person, okay? Included in this is 1 to 2 minutes for your practical movement demonstration. Again, I'll explain that in a moment when we have a look at the criteria. So your research presentation has to include a historical and cultural background of the theatre tradition, a brief overview of the conventions of the theatre tradition. The theatre tradition, guys, here is Commedia dell'arte. So you need to give me some kind of historical and cultural context. Tell me about the context of Commedia dell'arte. Where did it come from? What's the history of this theatre tradition? A brief overview of the conventions. So as we've done in the past with realism, with Brecht, each theatre style has different conventions or acting techniques that it uses. So you need to, as you saw above in your task description, choose 2 that your group will discuss. You also need to give an overview of the stock characters that will be seen in your physical demonstration. You need to only focus on, I guess, the characters that you're going to show me about in the physical demonstration. So you could give me an overview and say, hey, these are all the characters within Commedia dell'arte, but our group is just going to focus on this character and that character. You need to give me a 1 to 2 minute physical demonstration that showcases how you practically explored each performance convention. So if your performance convention was, we'll talk about the conventions in a second, but if it was to do with status, how did you physically explore status as a group to try and get an understanding of how status works in Commedia dell'arte, okay? An explanation of how each convention could be used to create meaning in performance, a reflection on discoveries that were made during the process of you doing your research and working as a group, and what impact did that have on your learning in theatre as a whole, okay? For this presentation, every group must have a visual aid. That could be a Prezi, SlideShare, Google Slides, SlidesMania, whatever it is. As long as you've got some kind of slideshow, that's completely fine. And each individual student must submit a fully referenced source log, and that really forms the basis of your bibliography. I will give you that in class separately and we will discuss that. But each person in your group needs to have a source log. So, year 11, there are three parts to your criteria for this task. And you'll notice that this task is available on Google Classroom under Assessment 1 Mock Research Presentation. Okay? So, if you click on the link here in your task sheet, it will take you to the criteria sheet. Let's have a look. So, firstly, at level 7, 7 being the highest mark you can get for each criterion, is 0 to 1 being the lowest. What we're looking for in criterion A, as I mentioned before, is talking about the theatre tradition as a whole. So, in order to have excellent work, you need to basically have specific references to research. That means that you are telling me specific pieces of information that you found according to different research or different sources available. It shouldn't just be from the same website. You need a mixture. And your source log will talk about having a print source, so a book, perhaps an e-journal as well, and then a website. So you need to have a mixture of different types of sources. It says the student identifies, explains, and analyzes the theatre tradition and the performance convention chosen, looking at and effectively using a range of appropriate and relevant sources. The student explains the theatre tradition's cultural and or theoretical context. So we'll talk about the cultural and theoretical context in class, but this is you giving me the context, the background, the history of this theatre style and its importance. The second criterion, year 11, says practical exploration of the performance convention. At level 7, it says the student demonstrates and explains. You'll notice that there's a difference. It says explains at level 7, describes at level, let's say, 5, and then a 4 is only outlining, a 3 to 4, and anything beneath that in terms of your level of work is listing or not meeting the criterion. So explaining is a very important skill that we're going to be working on in class, okay? So explaining how did you practically experiment with movement in Commedia dell'arte or explore vocals in Commedia dell'arte, and we will go through some conventions together in class. The student provides a clear and effective demonstration. So this is all about you showcasing to me rather than just describing and telling me. You need to say, so what we first experimented with, and you'll do this as a group, is we tried standing on our toes, putting our head towards the side, looking towards the right, and trying to really mimic the style of a bird for the character Zani, for example. So you need to actually showcase what you did to me, your marker, okay? In the last criterion, we're doing a reflection. The reflection is very important. It says the student explains the impact that this task has had on them as a performer and that there are clear and effective appropriate links between this research presentation and other experiences that you've had in theatre. So you could compare what you've learned here to Brecht, to realism, to different theatre experiences or drama experiences that you've already had, and you need to explain how it's further developed your understanding of theatre as a whole. So 3 very clear criterion, okay? One is more practical and you demonstrating how you did something. The other is about a historical and theoretical context. And lastly, we're looking at a reflection, okay? So we'll talk about this more in class, but this is the task that you'll be doing in week 6.